Well, aloha, friends, and welcome to another fun episode here in Badbeard's Basement. And today I am sitting with Bobby D himself. That is right. We are going to talk about love, life, and the pursuit of happiness. Where you want to spend your time, it's ultimately up to you, but do not waste your time.
I love everything about what you just said.
So check it out. We talked for about an hour. We share some whiskey and several stories about the business, about some mutual friends, and a lived life, would you say?
Yeah, I live life. And, sometimes you might not get the opportunity, so cherish the people that are in your life and definitely let them know that you love them.
That's it. So enjoy this episode, and we'll see you on the next one.
Well,
cheers, brother.
cheers, sir. Thank you for having me.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks
Appreciate
for being
it.
on the show.
Now, are you one of those guys that like eye contact?
Alan and Noah get down on that in an aggressive way that makes me feel like I'm being slightly violated before I have my drink.
Yeah, they're like, you have to look in. I'm like,
No, I want to check in, but I'm not going to,
do I have to?
Yeah, there's an optional.
All right.
All right, look good.
Well, I love
good.
the setup. Let me just say that. It looks
Again,
like
welcome. Welcome to Badbeard's Basement. We have Bobby on today. Introduce yourself, Bobby.
Well, you know me. My name is Bobby Souris. I go by Bobby D most of the time. That was a decision based on there's a lot of Bobbies. There's a Bobby James, a Bobby Jordan, a Bobby so on. So I found out from my mom that on my birth certificate, my first name is Robert Daniel.
Huh.
Middle name blank. And I was like, why would you do that? But it turns out, so it became the thing. My mom and my grandfather went by Bobby D. So I started doing that. And there's never a question because they're like, somebody will go, Bobby D. Never which Bobby is that.
Yeah.
So Bobby D. And I don't know. I was out of town. I reached out to you. And I was like, how's the podcast going and everything else? And just wanted to sit and chat with a buddy, and here we are.
And here we are.
Obviously, I work in stunts, if nobody knows that.
Well, and I can jump in to say, I know Bobby from my move here to Atlanta, jumping into an industry that I've always kind of flirted around, and you've been deep in for some time. Both South Florida boys coming from Florida, and then finding ourselves in Atlanta. More specifically, I don't know that I met you there, but it was at your studio, Level Up. It was in its previous location, I believe. But was that when we met, or it was on?
I think it was on Boo.
It was on Boo.
Did we meet on Boo? I think that's
so.
where we
Yeah.
met. And that
you were in your.
I was in a fat suit. Well, I was, which was a nightmare. I have PTSD from that with clowns, and most people are afraid of clowns.
You're afraid of being in the clown.
I'm afraid of being in a clown.
Yeah.
Which sounds inappropriate, but it makes sense
Accurate.
in this industry.
Yeah.
I had some issues. Do you dive? Do you do scuba?
Yeah.
You are for
this year.
scuba, eh?
Hey.
Lubin. So my wife and I went to Fiji. We got married during COVID, and we weren't able to do any kind of honeymoon, no travel, no stuff. So we pushed this trip off for like a year and a half. We finally went there, and I had never scubaed, and she's a dive master, a rescue diver, all the other stuff. And so she wanted to dive with me, and I was like, ugh. And the more I thought about it, anytime I thought about breathing underwater in the thing, and I went back to the clown.
Ah.
I had this like thing where I was like,
Oh,
no, I can't
claustrophobia.
breathe. I'm in the clown again.
Well, and it's curious, your experience in the clown was different than my experience in the latex as a zombie because it was so cold that even though I was frigid, you were overheating.
Well, it was a 60 pound fat suit.
Yeah.
One. And they built this, like they molded me and made this prosthetic mask and then latex gloves and then the shoes and all the other stuff. And I think that the main problem that I ran into is I was so used to doing that for 10 years. I did character work that I stayed in it for 6.5 hours without a break. I was supposed to get a break like every 30 to 45 minutes. So 6.5 hours later, I started to kind of lose it a little bit. And I was like, I gotta get out. I gotta get out. And they're like, you okay? You okay? I was like, no, I gotta get out right now. I started freaking out. That was also based on my arm was now in the fat suit because they had a prosthetic arm, and I wanted to move my head and my neck a little bit, and I was just like, and then I realized I need 2 hands to get the head off.
Oh, even worse.
And that's when I got a little claustrophobic, and I was just like, Ah.
Then you're dependent on other people to make sure you can get out.
So aside from all that, Boo was a project that Alan D'Antoni was running, and I believe that Noah. I don't know if Noah introduced you to Alan or how that all transpired, but that's how I met you, was through Boo, Alan, and Noah.
My introduction, I met Noah in Los Angeles. Our paths crossed, and then we kept up through my transition to Atlanta, reconnected here, and then as that continued and developed, I met Alan along the way, and then when Boo came along, I was able to Taft in
Oh, you got Taft
on that film.
That's
yeah.
amazing.
It was great.
Yeah.
So that was our introduction, and then it's just been roses since.
Yeah, and you know, in all honesty, one of the things that we talked about that we haven't gotten into on camera was just being personable and being able to communicate and talk to people, which is why I think a podcast is a good kind of forum for you. When you came by to my birthday party at the studio, you sat with my wife's my in-laws, and they're like, I want to know about you. And there's all these stunt people and all this stuff going on, and everybody's drinking and hanging out, and you were just like, let's talk to them, And it's such a commendable quality in terms of being able to just take yourself and put yourself into like, yeah, these people I will probably talk to on set and do those things. And maybe you didn't differentiate it like that, but also like, I'm going to take the time and I'm going to meet these people. And then you did that, and then you would float around. And I always equate that to like high school, where it's like, oh, there's the jocks, then there's the band geeks, then there's the this and the cheerleaders and the things. And for me, I was always the person that was not like, I played sports, but I would also, I talked.
You weren't exclusive to one group.
Yeah,
You
I
got
just
off.
bounced around, and it kind of reminds me of that, where it's like there's something that you do, and which is a super super important quality in terms of in this industry and being on set.
Well, it's fun that you see it so similarly the way I do, and then equally my experience, like as high school was, I went to 5 high schools, and then being the
now it all makes sense.
always being the new kid, and I was the cheerleader, I was the jock, I was a version of a geek, and I got around.
What about band geek?
I was in choir.
Okay, that counts.
And one of the schools I was in choir, and then the next school, these are big high schools, only had a woman's female choir. And they're like, well, I guess you're in this. So we sang ABBA like every week, and then our teacher had narcolepsy, and she would just sleep through class, and then she would wake up and we'd sing ABBA, and then she'd go back to sleep. And that was so that was that experience. But like you said, not specific to what I would say is not specific to the stunt industry. The social acumen and the skill that I feel like I've developed along the way of just always being the new kid, being comfortable in the uncomfortable, is a valuable asset. And then specific to your birthday, I like going into any environment, and if I see anybody that feels like a little
that's exactly what it
not
was.
fitting in or
they
not, then I'm
weren't
like
stunts. They were just some in-laws.
Yeah,
and
so
like,
I just inclusivity is my thing, and I just want everybody to be having a good time. So that's what I did that day. And equally, like respecting you, it was your birthday, and your lovely wife. I'm always curious to get to know more, and that's why I was like, who better to ask than these fine individuals? And they were great, very sweet people.
So interesting thing, if we were to dive into the subject of my wife, my wife, my favorite position is a dog style. That's where the man stands like this and the dog gets here. My dad makes fun of me, and he says that we did everything backwards, and I don't take it as a barometer or a gauge for anyone else's relationship. But we met on Avengers Endgame, and then, but I was in prosthetics, and I was kind of what I described as a female-ian. So without naming any names, a couple of people there, because I looked like a female, were checking me out, and then somebody corrected them and was like, pretty sure that's Bobby. And they're like, hey, Bobby, and I'm like, yo. And they're like, I've been looking at his ass all day, right? Mm-hmm. So fast forward, that person did that to everybody else. As soon as they found out, they're like, yo, check that out over there, right? So Maya and I met, we couldn't, like, she was the sorcerer people
Okay.
that opened the portals, and I was a Femalian Ravager. And then we then met again on Jungle Cruise, and we were both, like, the men were just loincloths and were body painted, and the women were palm prongs and loincloths. And we just sat next to each other and people watched because all the extras and all the stunt people were just checking each other out. That everybody was like, ooh, 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 you know. And I was like, no wonder that tribes make so many babies. Everybody's half naked, right? And the going joke was that we eventually were like, what's going on under that loincloth over there, right? So, and this is not me airing out any laundry because this is the story. We started to hook up. That was it. We weren't doing anything else. And then one day I was like, you know, we could like eat food also. And so we'd hook up and eat food. And I was like, you know, we could also like watch a movie, eat, and then hook up, you know?
Yeah.
And then so before we lived together or even made it official, we bought a house together.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And
Is
we
that where
had-
you are now?
Yeah.
Okay.
And we had the idea that if we were to buy a house together, if it all goes south, I'll buy her out, she'll buy me out, or we'll sell it and split the profits. But we're going to go rent a house because we want to see the next step of our relationship if we can live together. And we were both like, well, we're throwing money away on rent. Why are we going to give it to somebody else? So we bought a house. Then we got dogs. Then we got chickens. Then like, so now we had a house, dogs, chickens.
Yeah.
We went into business with our studio. Then we got married, right? And my dad goes, you did everything backwards. I go, but it's working.
Hey, don't rock the
You know,
boat.
you can't knock it because it's working for us.
Yeah.
And she is a very unique individual, and I'll give her that all day. I've never met a woman that is like her, you know, and that's kind of where our relationship is and how it works and whatever else. There are things like in relationships where you're like, well, you yell at each other or you have these disagreements and you do like, yeah, we have all that, but we talk about it like adults.
Yeah.
And that's how our relationship has, you know, flourished and whatever else. And she is also in stunts with the specialty in water and water safety and all that other stuff. And it's just, it's funny because I'll talk to a lot of my friends and they'll be discussing how much they argue and they're like, oh, well, blah, blah, blah does this and that, and I'm so frustrated, this and that. And then they'll both look at me and go, Bobby, do you have that with Maya? And I was like, oh, leave me out of it because we don't.
Yeah.
And I don't want you to like, one, gauge your relationship off mine, but two is judge me for the fact that like you think that I'm like, one, either hiding something, or two, that my relationship isn't like that and it's better than yours and I'm doing a thing.
Well,
you know?
and equally, I think, you know, everyone's relationship is their own business. Like, if you need counsel or you need, you know, conversation, that's something, you know, and a healthy way to seek out. But if you're just looking to, you know, confirm that, you know, somebody's got it better or worse than you, then you're barking up all the wrong trees and you start looking inside before you start looking out. But
So-
I think a healthy amount of arguing and being able to have discourse, but in a healthy way.
So I have a question for you. Is you're in a relationship and you're dabbling in the industry world, but you've had a whole thing with the bikes and the relationships and all the other stuff. I don't know what those hours entail. So my question to you is, I ran into, as I was delving into the industry, when I was dating, nobody understood that I'm going to have my phone on silent and it's going to be in a bag or it's going to be somewhere else and I'm not going to get to it. And 16 hours later, if I rap, or 12 hours, maybe it's 8, whatever it is, like chances are I'm not going to have my phone on me, right? And as I was dating people, that was a problem because I would get the mushroom cloud. I don't know if you've ever had that, where it's like, hey, how's your day going?
Okay.
Is there a reason you're not responding? What's going on? If you don't want to talk to me, this and that. But by the time I get to it, it's like I open my phone and it's a mushroom cloud. Just
Yeah.
and but like you see, how's your day going? To like, you know what? Fuck you. And if you're not gonna, you know, and I'd go, oh boy. And because my wife is in that industry, that made it so much easier. So my question to you is like, do you have that? Have you experienced that? Is that a thing in your world?
Well, I guess unique to myself. My experience in the industry, and so more context and background. I went from film school in Orlando the year the incentives left Florida.
What school?
Valencia.
Okay.
Yeah, back when it was VCC, Go Matadors. I think they're like Bobcats now or something like that.
The Matacats.
No, thank you. So then I left, graduated, all the industry left Florida, and so I was like, I guess you graduate film school, you go to LA. And along the same timeline, I had started dating this lovely lady.
Is there a noise? What's the noise?
Meg?
I don't know what it was, but go ahead.
There's a lot of plumbing above your head. It might be.
I didn't mean to interrupt.
No.
But it was just one of those things where I heard like a tick, 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 tick.
I don't know. We'll have to diagnose it. But I moved to Los Angeles with that partner, and we began a life through the industry. Different than your experience, but similar in the sense that I was on sets, I was working in productions, I was PAing up to producing, and then shooting and editing and all the hats, all the jobs in the LA experience. It might be Meg walking to and fro.
Either way.
Given that our experience together through that was at the beginning, and then we progressed through it, we didn't really have that hill to climb because the trust was already there that, I know what you're doing and where you're at, and so it didn't really matter. Fast forward to when I wasn't in partnership with that lovely lady anymore, and I was in the dating scene. At that point, I was an adult, and I'm like, if I am dating someone or whatever that experience was, it was like, handle your shit. We're adults, and I'm already...
Yeah, you kind of see that. You see, it's like, this is a red flag. We haven't even gotten involved.
Yeah, I was going to say for you.
And that's kind of what my point was, is that I went through like people that especially weren't in the industry and didn't understand that. Mm-hmm. They're like, well, so you're saying you can't get to your phone at all to just even respond? And I'm like, I got two things.
I got a loincloth. Where do I put it?
But I got two things, right? Which is like goes into what is more important. And so I would go to my phone if I could, and I'd look, and I'd see my dad text me, emergency, call me. That's the one phone call I would make. Or my mom would go, hey, Bobby, I really need to talk to you. And I'd go, okay. Or my brother, or somebody that I see something that is pressing. Yeah. And I would get to that. But if it was like, hey, how's your day going? I'd be like, I'll get to you when I get off set. Like, yeah. Because the last thing, and this is for a lot of younger people in the industry, I have made my career more so from being off of my phone, even when I'm told to go to holding, and I go in there and there's veterans in there, and I will never name names. That's not the point of the thing. It's like you can have people that have been in the game for a long time, and green is the grass, and they're all in there because they're just doing what they were told, which is like, go fuck off, or FO in the industry, and go stay over there. And I never wanted to do that, so I would stay outside of holding. And I would be close enough in earshot to hear what's going on, but not on my phone, and not too close that I'm being like, hey, what are you doing? The coordinators and the riggers are having a conversation here, but I would pay attention to what's going on.
You would be present.
I would be present enough.
Yeah,
right?
Not check out.
And then I would get tapped on the shoulder and go, hey, go grab all the guys and this and that. And I'd walk into the room and go, hey, guys, everybody, we need to go do the thing. And people started to trust me to sort of delegate, even if those people were further along in their careers. They would just do what they're told, and they'd go in the thing and be like, when they come and grab me, I'm ready to go. And they would just like this, and I was like, I don't want to be that guy, and I stay away from being that guy. And it served me well, and it's not something that I'm saying,
do or
hey,
do
you
not.
know what? It may never affect your ability to get hired, but that's not the guy I wanted to be, and it served me well. You know what I mean? So within that, it was, something where, especially like, if you were dating and you're just sitting and holding, or your trailer and your girl you're dating texts you, you could absolutely be like, da, 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 da. But I made it a point to put that away and stay off of it and be present. And that affected my ability to date, because I was like, this isn't going to work out. Yeah. You're not giving me any credit. Maybe you have trust issues, maybe you don't, whatever. And that's neither here nor there, but there's two things to be said about that. Is one, dating, and two, the industry, And when I combine those two, I found myself kind of
Well, I think too the curiosity with that is what you're describing is healthy boundaries, right? It's like, I'm over here putting my time and intention and attention into the work that I am subscribed to, and that's where I'll be, because I want to be the best version of that. If I have to split my focus with you, then you're going to get half of me, they're going to get half of me, and both of you are going to be disappointed in me. So
Yeah.
the boundaries is important, what you're speaking to, but I think that even applies outside, because even one thing that does come up, and that's something I navigate for myself, is not specific to being on the phone at work, but, and it's been throughout my industry or my career, is my phone to me is my lifeline to work.
Yeah.
If I'm getting a call, it's from this producer or this job or this brand, they want to do this thing. And so since I'm not at a 9-to-5 office job that I just show up Monday to Friday and get a check on, 2 weeks from now, I am dependent on finding that next job.
Yeah.
And so I find myself at times, and Meg will tell you too, that she's like, oh yeah, you answer every call, where a lot of people don't. Like, they're almost adverse to answering unknown numbers, where I see an unknown number, if it's not like my local
That's a
239,
paycheck.
I'm like, let's go,
I see an
hello?
unknown number, yeah, I'm with you.
New number, what's up? And so that's been a curiosity for both of us to navigate, because I've always lived that way. She's always had a job, a professional experience, and so that's been an interesting dynamic. She appreciates it, but equally I understand too that I have to be mindful not to, if we're on a date or if we're in some specific dynamic that I'm like, that's not for now, as much as I would like to, that's neither here nor there, but that's an interesting caveat.
A funny side story is I was on a date with a girl. And this was after I moved. I spent 1 year in LA, 2015, 16-ish, before I moved here, and I've been here since.
Where were you living in LA, if you recall?
I was two places. So I was staying with a coordinator on his property in Malibu and helping out and whatever else. He owned 10 acres on a Malibu mountain, and I was like,
which coordinator?
do you want to know names?
Yeah.
No, he's a really good dude. His name is Mickey Giacomazzi.
Oh, that's a lot of letters.
Yeah, and a very Italian guy. And, I was working on his property.
We rolling?
And one of the things that I absolutely knew, like, I was in a very good place mentally, and I got there, and this was during a time when Spider-Man was just cast as Tom Holland. At the time, he was my height and my weight, and I was world record holder for the longest front flip. I could do every flip and trick in the book. I was just getting into stunts, and I was like, dude, I'd be an awesome Spider-Man. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
And so I asked him, I said, what could I do to put myself in line for that? I didn't ask him for a job. And I said, what could I do to put myself in line? And he put me through the ringers at that moment. He was like, dude, there's 100 guys like you. You're not special. Those guys have more skill. They're going to get the job before you get the job. I knew you were going to ask me this and that. And he just kind of went off on me in a way that I didn't understand at the time. But now I see it, what he was doing. And I just looked at him, and I was like, hey, Mick, I'm on a mountain in Malibu. Like, it doesn't really get any better. Whether I ever get the job or I don't get the job, all I asked you was, like, what could I do to put myself in line for that? And he goes, I can't get you at all. I can't get under your skin at all, this and that. I was like, dude, I'm breathing air, I'm eating food, I'm living on a mountain in Malibu. Like, life is amazing. And he was like, and
You
he kind of
passed
like,
your first test, son.
yeah, but I didn't realize that. I just thought he was being a jerk. You know what I'm saying? But I spent some time out there, and the point was like I went back for a visit, and I went on a date with this girl, and I was attempting to talk to her, and she was just in her phone. So I grabbed my phone and I text her,
Oh, nice.
sitting next to her, and I was like, "Hi," and she goes, "Bring." She looks over. She goes, "You just text me?" I go, "Hey, you looked at me," you know. So there is a world where that is something, and now I'm married, and that's not a thing that I'm currently going through. But if there's anybody out there that's kind of dealing with that and going through the cycle right now of dating in the modern world and what they're doing and all the other stuff, it's like, a lot of people think it's very hard, and I don't think it is. I think that we get fixated on, I really like the way this girl looks, I like some of her traits, and then when we see the red flags, we overlook the red flags because we really wanted to work with this person. It doesn't have to be as complex as that. You know, we can actually just go, you know what, there's 8 billion people out there, I'm going to move on. You know.
It's funny you express all this lovely information and promote a lifestyle of well-being and mindfulness. And so, you know, I met you through a stunt community and the industry that we're in.
Oh, I know where you're going with
but
this.
then we fast
We
forward.
found out.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
we found out, and if I recall, it was in a funny way to me. And I was like, whether it was like your website or maybe just being at the studio one day, and I was
saw
like,
one of your posts.
Was
is
it?
what it was, and you were going to the Sons,
Sacred Sons.
the Sacred Sons, and it turned out that my business partner facilitates the Sacred Sons with those guys, and he's a life coach. His name's Kevin Walton, Source Radiance, the Light Beings, and all that, and that was an interesting moment because I was like, oh my goodness, like yeah, like you just said, is that I think Badbeard and I are more aligned in a lot of how we operate and our baselines and that kind of stuff, and you know, than we knew when we previously knew. Like it was a really cool acknowledgement and an expansion of awareness in that space of going like,
it was all the confirmation I needed to know that like the people I was surrounding myself with and the directions I was going were the right choice.
Yeah.
Because there's so much that I can do because you have to live outside yourself and push boundaries and be uncomfortable in different spaces and okay with that. But when you see indications along the way, and that was a good one, a confirmation of like, oh, okay, these are good people, you're finding your footing, although it may be unclear at sometimes, that was a big one for me that I was like, oh, okay, wow.
well, and so Kevin and I talk about these things all the time. We have, so...
Oh, sorry. Computer, volume 0.
we had a little background music.
I know, then I'll get flagged like, oh, you didn't license these songs. I go, what songs?
Oh.
But
yeah.
it wasn't that bad.
Caca. So Kevin and I've known Kevin for 20-something years. His first acting job was my first directing job. And my business partner at the time down in Florida, his grandmother died. He inherited some money. He's like, I want to do a movie. And I was like, he chose me to direct it and all these things. And we had a casting, and that's how I met Kevin. Kevin was not the same dude, but he was always who he was going to be.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense.
I've heard stories.
Yeah. so he was a rap guy and thing and whatever else, and a former college football player, and our relationship has grown and grown and grown to the point where we operate from a very specific place. And if you talk to him, you know, like, hey, what you been up to? He's like, oh, just out here transforming lives and doing the things. And I'm like, cool, you know. And I've had this thing, and he's checked me on it a couple times where it's like, I don't consider myself like he is a life coach. He's very Tony Robbins. He gets traveled around the world, and he helps people shift their narratives and get through traumas and do all these things. I love to do it by my actions. If you are inspired by what I'm doing, I will absolutely help you and guide you, but I don't want to be an instructor. I don't want to be a life coach. I don't want to tell you how to fix your stuff. I have a couple of different mentalities, which is like, none of us are broken. You know, we don't need fixing. If you can understand, like Alan Watts would say, I don't know if you listen to Alan Watts, but it's like, you ever seen a misshapen cloud or a misformed wave? It exists, and it's correct for its existence. Not all waves are the same, not all clouds are the same, and there's no such thing as like, oh, that cloud's wrong, right? You exist within that, and so you're correct in your existence. Doesn't mean that you don't have past traumas that you need to work through, because I do agree with Kevin that stepping into your greater potential and living from abundance and all that other stuff, and that comes with financial and spiritual and whatever it is. Like, I like to say that I speak 3 languages, which is scientific, spiritual, and religious. So if you told me that Jesus Christ is the end-all, be-all for you, I'll speak that language to you, but I'll equate it to the other things that I understand, you know? So Kevin and I have very interesting dynamics, which is like, if you know what your baseline is and you know what you want out of life, you command that, and then you kind of surrender to the process. And when you feel and see misalignments or distortions, you're able to fix them right away, or adjust them right away, or address them. And a lot of the times what happens is people get so distorted and so misaligned that it gets loud and it gets abrasive and it's way over here before they're able to acknowledge it and shift it back to their baseline. And we talk about that quite often in terms of like knowing your baseline, knowing how to acknowledge the misalignments and the distortions and doing that kind of stuff. So when I saw you going to the Sacred Sons, I was like, hey, there's a portion of me that went like, all right, like he's putting in the work. And I do think that there's something to be said about whether Sacred Sons was a positive thing for you, or it was something that you're like, I wouldn't do it again, but I loved the experience, or I didn't like it at all, whatever that was. A lot of people don't even put in the work. They don't explore, and Alan Watts had this whole thing. He's like, the fact that you're sitting here right now listening to me talk in his seminars and his things means that you're looking and you're searching for the thing. There'll come a time in your life where you realize that you had it the whole time and that you've been doing it the whole time. But until you get to that place, you might need some words, or you might need some guidance, or you might need some this. And that's what Kevin does.
Yeah.
And I'm always the kind of guy that goes like, I'm going to go shoot a short film. And then 5 people come to me after that and be like, that was so inspiring. I want to do a short film now. And I'm like, that's how I love to navigate through the thing. It's not through, I want 20 people and I want to workshop and I want to.
Yeah, certainly everybody has their own flavor of how they get down. My experience is I'm so in love with life and equally people that I have always gravitated towards industries that are just, like acting. It's like I can be the firefighter, I can be the military guy, I can be, because I want to experience it, and I can't commit to every life and career that exists. However, in our industry, you get to dabble a little bit at a really high level at times, where they'll give you the keys to something really dangerous, and they go,
You know how to work the jaws of life? We're going to really use this in the scene. You're like, yeah, actually, I was a firefighter for a little bit.
And so that's been my experience equally. Respect to Kevin and all the teachers out there that is their expression. Mine, similar to you, is just in the lived experience of interaction, finding a new space, a new crowd, a new high school, and then diving in so deep to it that I'm able to find my way and find success in it. Is the agenda usually. I want to not just survive, I want to thrive.
It's good to have an objective when you're going into it. That's the kind of command and surrender. Like, I know what I want. I know what bait I'm going to use. I know where I'm going to cast out. I know what I'm going for.
Yeah. And so with that, in this space, it's being comfortable that it's not on my timing to get to those places, but then to really just experience and experience all of it is the blessing along the way. But certainly unique, to say the least. And I think a lot of people, not everybody has the opportunity or at least the hardship to put them in the frame of mind to be aware that that's an option.
Yeah.
Because so many people can fall into, and this is me too, you fall into a pattern and all of a sudden you just you punch the clock. And then you're just doing the thing that you think you're supposed to be doing, and it's not until your world is rocked that you realize, I don't have to do that. And I think I learned that at a young age, and that's why it's not that I pivot, because from my vantage point, everything I do is all relative to each other. And so I think that's why at this juncture, being able to sit and have conversations with individuals like you, and then yesterday it was with Peter Lee Thomas, that's he's heading back out to Mike Tyson's fight camp. And so all these different experiences, I think, are part of my journey so that I can sit with individuals like yourself and have a cohesive conversation.
So there was COVID, then there was the strike, now there's maybe the IATSE strike. How's that affecting you in terms of are you just...
My transition?
Well, are you powering through it?
You forgot one of the big pieces too. Prior to the strike, I broke my knee. And so people were like, well, what great timing that you can't walk and we're on strike. I go, I was 6 months out before the strike. So I had a little incubation period, before the suck. Yeah. But to backtrack even further, when I separated from my ex, I realized I had the opportunity to come to the East Coast because I was like, oh, I'm California. I've invested a lot of time in life here. I'm with her and all her businesses and all the things considered. But when we split, I was like, okay, the East Coast is an option. I had a lot of great friends here in the stunt space, which is the film industry that I work in. So I was like, that's totally a lateral move. It's not like I'm jumping ship. And I came over here landing 2 weeks before COVID, the initial lockdown. So all the idea of a hustle or just meeting people like we like to do just went right out the window.
Yeah.
And
Not
so
allowed.
And that was a real change of pace. Quarantined down in Florida for a while, jumped back to LA here and there, kept my place through COVID, whoops, and then landed back in Noonan with my friends over there. And then that was the reintroduction. Put in the effort, met you along the way, and then that's all the way up until it would have been last year on Mega under Gupton and Buddy Joe. And then I break my knee. So the momentum that I thought, okay, the clouds are lifting, the momentum's picking up, we're finally getting back to steam. Break my knee, cap, not like ACL, MCL.
Ooh.
And so then I was in an immobilizer for like 6 months.
And how did you do that?
Everybody thinks I got this great story about a crash or a.
Oh, it could be. I'm sure it's a great story no matter what it is.
It could be
Let's hear
anything
it.
I want it to be. But I was working on Mega, and I was my buddy Sammy, had invited me to his wedding to be in his groomsman party. And so, like you were talking about earlier, it's like you have to acknowledge when and where to take breaks, and just like this is a life moment. The work will be here. Let's go.
Yeah,
do the
industry
thing.
versus life.
Yeah, where I was just like really just hyped on the ride, work ride, but knowing like, oh, okay, well, the reason I'm working is for these moments. So I was like, I'm going to step away and go do that. I went to my buddy's wedding, and it was a beautiful wedding. The morning of, we're out on, the girls are getting ready over on that side of the vineyard. Boys are getting ready over here. Sun is shining, and it's still gray and cold here in Atlanta.
Oh, I can't wait for this.
Yeah, and so he's a sporto boy. Like he's that's part of his thing. That he's like, all right, it's the morning of. We just ate Whataburger. He's like, let's play frisbee golf. Seems harmless as such, But I'm just of the mind like it's gray and cold in Atlanta, and now I'm in beautiful Texas, and the sun is shining. I was like, let's just like sit in the sun and drink beers. And he's like, no, I want to play. It's my big day. I want to play frisbee golf. And I was like, all right, yeah.
Oh.
So from the very first hole, which was on the patio right there, out into the beautiful grassy vineyard, I huck a throw out there. I go underhand. I'm left-handed, so I'm trying to send it around this tree.
Left-handed.
Yeah, and I slip out of my flip-flops, these flip-flops, and knee the cement as hard as I can, and just break it like that. And that was it. First hole, first throw. I was like, oh no. So I managed to do the wedding. I got crutched down. That was like a whole nother story. But went back to Atlanta, and then I was laid out.
Do you know the story in Charlie Wilson's War? It's an old story, but they used it in the dialogue of Charlie Wilson's War.
I might recall it.
We'll see. You remember that? Like, so there's like a village, and the neighbor goes to his other neighbor, and he goes, "Oh, it's so amazing. My son just got this new horse. It's so great." And he goes, we'll see. Next week, kid falls off the horse, and he comes over to the neighbor, and he goes, "It's so terrible. My son fell off the horse and broke his knee or broke his leg."
Mm-hmm.
He's like, "It's terrible." He goes, we'll see. The next week, the army comes, to like recruit, and because his kid had a broken leg, he couldn't be recruited to the army to go to war. And he's like, "Oh, that's great news." He goes, "We'll see." And then the next week, the village is raided, and because he can't walk, he gets, it's worse for him. And it's just every time that somebody was like, "It's great," he was like, "We'll see."
Yeah.
And then he's like, "It's bad." Like, "We'll see." And then it reminds me of that, where you're like, "Hey, I moved here and there was COVID." It's like, "This is terrible." Like, "Yeah, we'll see." And then things work out, and you're like, "Oh, I got time to go to this wedding. It's so great." "Yeah, we'll see." And then you break your knee, and they're like, "This is bad." You're like, "Yeah, we'll see."
Yeah.
That's how I kind of equate that, is because it's like, it's so difficult, and sometimes it's hard to understand and see the tapestry from when you step back versus the interweaving, and you go like, oh, it missed one of the weaves. It's a Greek philosophy of like seeing the tapestry for a whole versus being on the micro and seeing that like the interweaving missed. It was supposed to go under and it went over, and it's like, what's wrong? And you get focused on that, hyper focused on that, and you're like, well, just zoom out. You know what I mean? If you zoom out, you'll see the big picture.
Well, I think that's the fortune that we're both afforded from the kind of practices and modalities that we seek out to support
Correct.
the idea, and I equally know that, and so that's how I'm able to stay, keep the gun out of my mouth along the way, because I'm just like, holy shit, what else could go wrong? And then something happens, but the reality is exactly
Keep
as you
the
state.
gun out of my mouth.
Even sitting at
Amazing.
this table provided by Alan is because of the strike that went into effect. That I always knew I wanted to start a podcast in some fashion. I didn't, because I knew at what level I wanted to do it. I was like, until I can get it how I want it, I don't want to start it. Sure enough, even with the strike, this is where you sit because of a result of that. And so that's one of those things that I'm able to be aware. And then equally, so you asked my experience with Sacred Sons, if it was something, one way or another. The start of it was, the divorce was the biggest reset in my life.
You were married.
Married.
Okay.
And that was the biggest reset for me that I've ever experienced in life. And I've had people die. I've had traumatic brain injuries. I've almost died here, there, everywhere. But the divorce was the biggest wake-up call that I wasn't checked in to life as it was.
Yeah.
I was on a merry-go-round just thinking I was doing and achieving and grasping for something that wasn't real, when the thing that I was participating in partnership with another individual was so not as I would have desired.
Yeah.
And specifically not what she had desired, or whether she knew it or not at the time. But then with the Sacred Sons, giving a little more context to those questions kind of helped shape my frame of perspective as I grew that part of me, that guy that's willing to do the work.
Yeah.
And that's where I still exist today, and I'm really mindful to stay conscious to those pieces.
So let me ask you this. You said the brain injuries and some of the, what's the word I'm looking for? I'll call them near-death experiences. I don't know if that's the case. And then the divorce, you said, was kind of the wake-up call. What were those experiences like for you? Because I don't know if you've had this, is what I call paradigm shifts, where once you know something, you're unable to unknow it, and you will forever walk through life knowing that information that you can't go back, right? And I've had a couple of instances, but I'm curious to know, how did you get the brain injury, and what did that do for you, and why did the divorce, play into that was the shift for you?
I've thought about it in a lot of different ways, and then I guess it's through adversity comes change. I didn't cause the accidents that put me off course to almost die. Accidents happen, but it was an accident. But with the divorce, it was things that I was involving, and then equally with the accident too. That's just it was something that happened to me, and so it did have an effect. It did have paradigm shifts, and I changed a lot of different ideas and identities.
But it was what you were co-creating with somebody.
Correct.
Okay. Now that
then the
sheds
way-
light on. That's what I understand now.
Yeah.
Right? I was just curious.
Because I see us as equals in all things in the universe and the world, and that's every individual out there. And so knowing I had such an effect on someone that wasn't in line with the way I saw what I wanted for my life, what I wanted to bring to the world, it really just had such a effect on me that if there was a rock bottom for something, that was it.
Yeah. Well, usually that's the place, right, where you start to, again, it's an Alan Watts, and I think this is a hilarious thing. A lot of what we're chasing in life, and the goals and the things, or enlightenment, or whatever it is, we pursue it like chasing a fugitive with a drum. It knows we're coming, and it goes away. You know what I mean? So it's like, I'm trying to catch the fugitive. That's enlightenment. And you're banging the drum going, here I come. And it's just like, it's fleeting. It's going to go away.
Or it's the thief upstairs, and then you go to the next level, and then the thief is up there.
Right.
Yeah.
One of the best ones I've ever heard was it's grabbing a handful of sand underwater. Right? You'll never get a good grasp on it. And the more energy you waste trying to grab a handful of sand underwater, you just muck up the water. You know, and now there's no clarity, right? But if you just stopped wasting that divine energy trying to get like, I know that if I grab it like this and I go slow, you're still not going to get the same amount you started with because it's sand underwater and it's going to pull from you. And I always look at that and I kind of go, where am I putting my efforts and my energies? And is it fleeting? Because in essence, life is kind of like that, you know? So am I wasting sort of my divine energy on something that is, I'll never really get a good grasp on it, and by the time I get up, I'm going to have a little bit of sand, and then everything's going to be mucky. But if you stop and let it settle, then you'll kind of get clarity, and you'll know if you want to do that some more. You know, so like, it's more of a curiosity thing in terms of, because I was in a really bad car accident, and it was after that I had clarity on certain things, right? A relationship I was in, I got out of that, I had clarity on certain things, you know. So I'm always curious when I hear, like I was in a really brain trauma, and then I was going through a divorce, and I was doing like, what was the catalyst there that was, but you answered the question, which is co-creating, right? Because you're like, you had chapters that were co-created with somebody, and you're like, So just a...
Well, then to bring it full circle, as I entered this space of the stunt industry, right, and as I see how people do it differently and everybody has their own path in all things, I've encountered people that think I'm doing it wrong or don't know exactly what it is I'm doing, so they don't know where I fit. And I can find frustration in that because I see them as gatekeepers, in essence, for certain opportunities. But then more specifically, what I lean back on is like, well, I'm not trying to be a 7th degree black belt that grew up, went to the Olympics, taught at a dojo for 10 years. I'll never be that guy.
Yeah.
You know, catch me in the streets though. But but equally, you know, all these different things that I acknowledge, like that's not my thing, and my expertise in the space isn't as such. And I won't find fault in myself for not being what you are, what you think I should be. How you think I should operate in the space. I just do what I do and know that that's enough.
Well, that leads me to part of why I reached out to you and we talked and whatever.
Well, you got a job? Let's go.
I did. I got a job. I was in Arkansas for 5 weeks, and that's an experience, and we can get into that. But part of what I realized within that job and everything else, I have been, again, not approaching it the way that everyone else approaches it. But I've always had this idea, and it comes partially from Kevin and partially from how I operate and all the other things, is that I feel like the industry is very cutthroat, and what we call the sense of community is not really what it seems to be. And if we were to set a better standard, a lot of people, the majority of people, will gravitate towards that standard, and that will become the new standard in the industry, and you will either shift or get left behind. And that's where I've been for a very long time, and I've been shunned, and I've been blacklisted, and I've done all the things. And that same stuff, fast forward, has been the thing that people have called me recently and said, you know, the fact that you stood up to that person is why this person is hiring you today, because nobody stands up to that person. Nobody's had that happen. And I'm like, yeah, it's because I knew if I just stood on what was right, it would eventually, like if I never work in the industry again, I knew I stood on what was right, you know. And it's not to take a moral high ground and say, I'm better than you, and I know better, and I'm doing it a certain way. It's like, I think we all know that if, just like your moral compass, It's like people are going to continue to do these things, and as long as we allow it, it's going to continue to be the way the industry is. But if we set a better standard and we go, it doesn't have to be like that. You don't have to get cussed out on set by somebody in front of everybody. They can tug on your shirt and pull you to the side and go, hey, next time don't do that. And I'm going to, now that person, you created work for them, because they're going to have to go and maybe put out a fire or two because you're so green that you did something you weren't supposed to. But being cussed out about it, or being like the moment you finish the job, the person goes, great job, and then goes and tells every coordinator they know that you didn't do a good job and never hire this person, versus having the mentorship and the big brothers that will come to you and tell you, hey, this is what I heard. This is what you need to work on. Do I agree with all of it? No, but I'm telling you, if you want to make it in this industry, these are the things. And I do think that that speaks volumes of where we are, both societally, in the industry, with individuals, you know what I mean? Like a lot of relationships, a lot of the industry, a lot of the community, you know, I do think that we're a little bit misaligned. Might be a lot of bit misaligned, but there's something to be said about what we said earlier, which is chasing the dragon. It's very much like a drug. You know, you make $20,000 for the year, and you're
and just for the folks at home, they didn't get to participate in that conversation, but chasing the dragon specifically is like these jobs they run are great rates.
Yeah. So chasing the dragon in the drug world is, I get the first high, and then I take the same amount of drug and I don't get the same high, so now I got to up that amount. And then I get that high that I had the first time, but now I'm doing twice as much. And then I have to continue that, where it exponentially increases in order for you to get the same high. Well, in the industry, it's like, oh, I worked a job, I worked 4 months, I made this amount. I never want to do anything else again. I'll never go back to a 9 to 5, right? This is for me. And that was enough, because you didn't up your quality of living. You were like, I've been living like this for so long, now I have extra money, like a little bit. But then you go and get a house and a car and the thing that requires you to make that same amount that you made for those 5 weeks or those 3 months. And then it happens again. And you're like, cool, now I've worked this much and this much. And you went from 20,000 to 50,000, and then 50 is not enough, and then 70 is not enough, and then 120 is not enough, and then you break $200,000 for the year. And it's like, you were happy before you were making that amount of money, and every time it happened, you steadily increased your cost of living, your quality of life, and all the other things. But like, was your quality of life not good when you were at 50? It was probably amazing. You were probably eating well, and you had time to exercise and time to see family and do whatever else. But you get to that point where now you're making 500,000 or more, and there's no time to spend with your wife or your life or your mom or your whatever else like that. And I experienced that on Boo. And I don't know if you know this or don't know this, but for me, it was, I don't keep my phone on me, which we talked about. I went to Alan day one when he hired me, when I was just a skeleton, before I was the clown, before I was on the rigging team, before I was doing previs or any of that stuff. And I said, Alan, my mom is very sick, stage 4 cancer. I'm going to keep my phone on me. I don't normally do this, but I have to have my phone on me. And he said, absolutely. Keep your phone on you. Fast forward, if I needed to, I'd take a phone call. Alan, my mom's calling. It could be the moment that she's not going to, like, or who knows. So it got to a point where I was traveling, I was working, because my career was doing really well. And my mom knew that. And I told her, I was like, she was in Pensacola and I'm in Atlanta. And I was like, I will visit you as much as I can. This is what I've waited for this whole time. And I struggled with guilt. Should I be with my mom every moment until she passes, or her watching me attempt to get to this level in my career, and now I'm maxing out on a show, and I'm like, this is what I've waited for this entire time. And she was like, no, Bobby, I understand. So every weekend, I'd drive to Pensacola, 5 hours. I'd spend the whole weekend with my mom, drive back, and work. Boo, with Alan. And then was doing it weeks, weeks, and weeks. And then one day, Alan comes and goes, hey, construction didn't finish the set. We were supposed to do the wire gags. It's not happening. Production's going dark. We're going to stay on contract. We're going to clean out the trailer. We're going to organize it. We're going to wipe the pads down. We're going to keep busy over this week. And I went, Alan, I'm leaving. It's actually a little, like, shit comes up. But I was like, dude, I'm going to go. And Alan goes, get the fuck out of here. I'll cover for you. So I left. And it was during that week that my mom passed. And I was just like, it's one of those things where, like, the universe provides, and if we just give it, the opportunity to support us. So I left. Production went dark out of nowhere. I go back to Pensacola. My mom passes. I'm there for that, every moment of that. And then I worked out all the details, and I came back, and I went back to work. And then over the weekend, I had a memorial at my house, and I planted a Christmas tree with my mom. And it was that thing where I was struggling with, what is more important here, my life or my career? And I was putting the industry ahead of that, and I struggled with that. And then I had to come to that understanding where, like, I knew what my baseline was, and I knew that if I just kind of surrendered to, like, I'm doing both. Like, two things can be true at the same time. You don't have to say, well, if I'm going to be a fisherman, I can't be a family man, right? And I think that that's where we've deviated from quite a bit, is that understanding that, like, dude, we're not curing cancer over here. You know what I'm saying? We're just making movies. And if you got to walk away from it, the fear that people have, like, well, such and such will never hire me again. Alan said two things to me, which is, one, and I'll never forget it, go. Well, it was keep your phone on you, go, whenever you need to go, whatever else, never going to hold that against you. And then the other was, if you're working for somebody and they are going to hold that against you, you don't want to work for them anyway, right? So I'll never apologize for emotions coming up and things like that. But I tell people all the time, like, you're so excited to work on this job and do this thing, whatever else. Dude, I would fucking give it all up to just talk to my mom one more time. One more time. And was it worth it? Like, granted, I struggled with doing both, but I did both. But I still think about that, and I go, like, man, like, where are we in that dynamic? And if there was anything, I really wish I could just touch somebody and go, hey, like, you don't have to feel this fear anymore. You don't have to have that self-consciousness, or, like, if you woke up in the morning and you felt the way I feel about you, about yourself, you'd never question whether or not you're worth it and you matter and all those other things. So, sort of a long rant, but at the same time, that's where I'm, at, is like, there are so many more important things. And if you just realize that you can do both, like, both are there, and if you decide that, the people around you, if they're in the same mental space, they'll understand that. You know what I mean?
When ultimately, like, if you're living from a place of integrity and the decisions you're making are ultimately, best for you, that respect that they'll have for you is equally going to, be for them. Like, choosing right for you is going to be choosing, because the better I can be for me is the better I can be for you. And I think, like, even, chasing the dragon, as it were, like, money is equally like a drug. Like,
it's the sand.
I've been living an artist's life where I've had a lot of successes and a lot of adventures and a lot of opportunities along the way, but I've never been in pursuit of a dollar amount with it. And so it's easy to see that when money presented as such, after living such a lifestyle, it can just be like, I want more of that. And then decisions start altering so you get more of that, and that's ultimately where you get lost in the mix. Specific to our industry, I think there is such a odd feeling of scarcity for every little bit of something that you start like holding tight, when like that's the fastest way to lose it, is by holding too tight and like letting go and being open to the thing. I subscribe to the idea that we all rise with the tides. Like the better you do, the better I do.
Yeah, the rising tide lifts all boats.
That's it.
That's my quote.
Anytime I can help someone, a brother or a sister in any experience, to let them shine, it's just going to shine just as bright on me. And so it's just always a curiosity when, and I like, you know, I not no disrespect for anyone else. I don't know the path they've walked to be where they are.
Yeah.
But it isn't that same idea that I just like would love to let them know, like, hey man, it's cool. Like I promise, it's cool.
Yeah. Well, interesting stories that have transpired is with my mom in particular. There was an instance where before she got sick, she was living in this house in Orlando, and she got a knock at the door, and the owner sold the house, and she got like, hey, you got to leave in 30 days. And she was like, Bobby, what am I going to, I'm living in Georgia. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? What am I going to do? My house is packed. My garage is packed. There's so much stuff in the garage. And I said, I'll come down and I'll empty out the garage and we'll figure it out. Worried. I came down, emptied out the garage. All the stuff she didn't need, we put out on the yard, and then the garage was emptied and the house was mostly emptied. And instead of having the mentality of like, oh, thank goodness, this is all done, I'm way further along, she went back to what I call human beings live in a state of constant amnesia. You can get on a ride at Disney, and it was amazing. You get off, and you're like, the water's expensive. It's hot. These lines are long, right? You're like, you know, you just rode an amazing roller coaster. Like, maybe hold on to that for a little bit.
Yeah.
Carry that with you. You know, so she was like, what am I going to do about all the stuff on the lawn? And I was like, well, it's not in the garage anymore, you know? So I was like, Mom, I don't know the answer. But just like you didn't know the answer to this, and we solved it, there's an answer. I can't look through the curtain and see the future and know that it all works out, but I know that it does all work out, which is why I stopped attempting to put feelings behind something that I don't know, but I know that every time it works out, every single time. So have some faith. I'm here. I'm helping you. The next day we woke up, the yard was empty. And she goes, what happened to all the stuff? It turned out, coincidentally, nobody knew, it was bulk trash pickup day. So everything we put out, bulk trash came, took it all, and went away. And I was like, I told you there was an answer. I told you.
Yeah.
You know, like, but you live in a different space than I live in, which is I had faith that whatever else it was going to work out. You were in worry. And again, I always go back to Alan Watts. And for anybody that's listening to this, it's worth taking the time to go on YouTube, type in Alan Watts, and listen to a little bit. And if you like it, keep listening. If you don't, you know.
Alan?
Is there more of this? Can I have more of this?
Yeah. Help yourself.
All right. Well, this is on the podcast. I'm going to get more booze.
There you go. We've been rolling for a wonderful hour and 3 minutes thus far. I'm going to go ahead and assume it's all, it has all been recorded at the highest quality, and it'll be so easy to cut together.
I hope it's a good conversation. You know?
It always is with you, Bobby. One, the fun thing about the podcast is this won't be the last time we're sipping whiskey on the couch. So it's going to keep expanding and growing, and I'm happy to have you on it at this juncture. Like I said, I think this is episode 17, which, as it continues, I don't know that it'll always matter to make reference to that, but I assume our conversation will always be expansive. We'll get Kevin in, and it is interesting. When I lived in LA, at some point, I was like, I need to try out a podcast format or figure out what that would look like for me. And I was living in my last place, and I set up some semblance of a podcast, but it was just my camera, and then I did a screen record with Kevin. Because I had been to a Convergence or a, you know, they got different names for all the things.
Yeah.
I had been to a couple events, and just the way he downloads is so powerful and so transformative and just so it invokes so many questions and just like aha moments that like you're like, yeah, that.
Why wasn't I doing this?
Yeah, and it's so obvious and clear that I was like, I wanna hear that, but I wanna share it with my audience. But like many things,
Well, he'll be back pretty soon. And I don't know if you know, he does once a month. He does an event here in Georgia.
I've been to a Sacred Sons event. I don't know the.
No, in Georgia, right up here in.
It's like a park, isn't it?
No. He's got a venue.
Oh, okay,
And he does. It's the Light Beings Gathering.
that's right.
And that's his thing. So it's once a month here. Source Radiance. You guys can go check all that out.
Yeah.
But he does those things. It's very transformative, right? I have had conversations with a lot of the people that do that, and sometimes it goes over their head, and they'll go, "It wasn't until you explained it in a simpler way that it made any sense to me," because there are a lot of big words, and there are a lot of things, but I don't think that that's something that's beyond you and your capacity to understand. But I've had
I got you fooled.
Huh?
I got you fooled.
Well, no, I've had a lot of conversations with people that it's like it's too in depth, it's too complex for them. You know, at the point at where they are.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know?
Well, and so I think it sometimes it takes the rug to be pulled out under from people for the kind of esoteric nature, the frou-frou, nature of what it is, or someone. What else has someone said? It was a funny, like the woo-woo. Like if you can take the woo out of it for some people, it makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
And so depending on the environment or wherever if you pick it up from a Tim Ferriss versus a light source, being, sometimes you can chew on it a little easier. But
Well, and that's why I was saying, like, for anybody that's listening that wants to go check out Alan Watts, because a lot of what he talks about is he'll explain it, and it's not an insult. He'll explain it so that the common person or a 5-year-old could really understand that, and sometimes that's the best way for the aha moment.
Well, and specific to Alan Watts, I mean, he was from a generation in the 50s and 60s that they didn't have, Spotify, they didn't have TV, they didn't have all the interactive activities that you could go do.
Yeah.
And so he was a literal orator. Like he was like a wordsmith that would go, tell stories, and equally as a philosopher, package things just to, give you a nice 2-hour entertaining, thought-provoking, for the time, really edgy stuff.
Yeah.
For what it was, because it wasn't necessarily counterculture, but it was from the Far East, and it was when people couldn't get to the Far East unless they were in the army.
Yeah.
Like with a gun.
One of my favorite things that he ever said was, if a guru can get you, right? Meaning, they're for lack of a better description, they're taking advantage of you, and you're paying them for their guru services. For as long as you are not prepared to have those thoughts on your own and have your own version of that guru should get you. Right? Like if you're susceptible to it, then he should get you for as long as he can get you, because one day you'll have the aha moment and you're just like. And I will say that that's the difference between Kevin, and I talk to him all the time about this. Is like, there's no special, there's no secret sauce. It literally is Kung Fu Panda, right? The secret ingredient in secret ingredient soup is nothing, right? The scroll. He does the scroll, and he's like, "Oh, it's you. You're the secret ingredient in secret ingredient soup." Like that makes so much sense, but that's what he was saying. Like you said, in that era, now you can watch Kung Fu Panda and you can get that same message, and it's a kid's show, but at the same time, I studied versus practiced. I practiced when I was there Buddhism in every capacity that I could, as I was traveling back and forth from LA when I moved out there to Florida to see my mom, and the packing and all that other stuff. There was an interesting dynamic where I just kept running into Buddhist temples. I'd see this cool building, and I was like, "What the fuck is that?" And I'd pull over and knock on the door, and this big dragon door would open, and it's like a Tibetan monk, and he's like, "Hello," and I'm like, "Hey." He's like, "You want to eat with us?" I'm like, "Yeah." and I find myself sitting at a table with like 25 Buddhist monks eating eggs. You know, and I'm just like, how did this happen? And then it was Tibetan Buddhism, Nichiren, which is Japanese, Chinese, Vietnamese, and the list goes on, where I was just like studying and practicing, and I would just stop into these Buddhist temples. And I came back and I talked to Kevin and I go, you know, I know that you stumbled on this on your own, right? Like, he never studied any of that, but it was the same. Like, I was like, this is a version of Buddhism. And it was interesting for me because it's like, well, this is thousands of years old, and all they're really saying is the same thing, and those principles, which, whether it's Alan Watts, or it's Jesus, or it's Kevin with the source, source radiance and the light beings and all that other stuff, I just found it to be an interesting dynamic where it was like, well, all they're really saying, is, to be a good human being doesn't require the money. It doesn't and the only thing that I will say that I disagreed with was like, especially certain like Vietnamese and not even Tibetans. Tibetans didn't do a lot of physical stuff, so a lot of them were overweight. And I was like, the Vietnamese, their prayers to start off was like 150 of these like bows, and I did like 75, and I was like, oh, no wonder you're all in shape. You know what I mean? But interestingly enough, I think the point that I was going to make, if there was a point, was that there were three things that I found in all of it, which was the physical, the spiritual, which is like the meditation aspect, and like, I guess for lack of a better description, was the vocalization, right? So it was always sound, movement, and mental. And the Tibetans chanted a lot and meditated a lot. They didn't move around a lot. And then I was like, well, they're all very round. You know what I mean? Nothing wrong with that.
Buddha was a big boy.
Yeah, and that's what I found later on, is like they all didn't, what's the word I'm looking for? They didn't accept each other. They're like, our Buddhism is the Buddhism. That Buddhism is not correct. And they all felt that way. And I was like, well, it's all one thing. You guys, like, some of you do 2 of 3 things. Some of you are like, we do the physical and we do the chanting. We don't do a lot of meditating. You know what I mean? Or, and the ones that did all 3, but they didn't really accept each other. And I kind of walked away from that, and I was like, well, that's kind of what Kevin's doing, is he's like melding all of that stuff into one, where it's like, you should definitely meditate, you should definitely exercise or do some physical stuff, and you should definitely vocalize. And sometimes that means, like in psychology or psychiatry, it's like rage fits, scream, shout, smash the thing. You know what I mean? Like, now you're doing 2 of those 3 things, right? And then sit and explore. But when I found that those were the three commonalities, I walked away from it, and I was like, well, there's really only one Buddhism, right? And not to say that this is correct, this is my observation.
Yeah.
Right? But what
time on the schedule at Level Up do we do this portion of class? Like, are all the guys over there getting this breakdown?
No, it goes back to what I was saying. It's like, I do this through my actions. Tom Watson and a couple of other guys have literally sat with me.
Which, it was his birthday yesterday. Happy birthday, Tom.
I posted a thing of me cracking a board over his head.
Oh, nice.
And I tried. I don't.
A board of education, perhaps?
Yes, but I don't social media very well. So like, I wanted to put all the happy birthday and all the other stuff, and then like I posted it, and it didn't let me write anything, and I was just like, what? And I tried to like edit it, and I couldn't, and I was just like, I'm 41. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know this very well. But in essence, what I came away with was there was 2 things that this monk gave me in this book, and I don't even think that it was something that he ever absorbed, which was Buddha is not one individual. It is the enlightened one. So Jesus was a Buddha. You know what I mean? Like, he's not a Buddhist, but he's a Buddha, right? because it doesn't mean what you think it means. Like the true definition of it was the enlightened one, right? Then Buddhism is your individual path to enlightenment. And I went, shit, I'm a Buddhist.
There you go.
I had no idea. Here I'm Greek Orthodox and Catholic and all these other things that I was brought up with, and I realized, and then I talked to Kevin about it, and I was like, with the Sacred Sons and all the other things, and I was just like, this is what you're teaching. I don't know if you know that. And he was like, no, it's different. And I was like, it's not. It's not.
I'm going whoever's got the best potlucks. That's who's got my...
Which leads us to level up, right? I talked to a few people the
Well,
other
and,
day.
and for the folks watching, like fill them in what Level Up is.
So Level Up is a film studio that we started during COVID. We often, in stunts...
Brick and mortar space.
Yeah, so we previs and we shoot when we're doing stunts, and we had gotten pretty good at it. And then when COVID shut everything down, me and Kane Sinclair were like, we should continue to shoot things and do stuff. And so we did a commercial, and somebody saw that commercial and asked us to do a commercial. And then I went to pick up a check for that commercial we did, and the guy had a building, and I was like, how much is the building? And he's like, you need a space? I love what you guys do. And so we got our first building, and then we bought lights and cameras and lenses and things and expanded, and then we found a new building and we moved. So now we're over in Tyrone, and Level Up is a film studio, but we also, we're an open door policy for the community, the stunt community, because what we want is we want people to be able to come in there and train and level up, their skill sets.
And that's the whole gamut. You got people teaching VFX classes. You guys are doing boxing, cardio classes. You're doing high-level
fundamentals
wire
to
works.
stunts. We got wire work days. We've got classes for, learning lenses and cameras and things. And it goes back to, like, in this industry especially, Jim Rohn, if you know him, he'll talk about, like, adding value. So when I was working with Alan had no idea that I did VFX or editing or any of that stuff. Nick Bensman and Noah found that out, and then even though I was just a skeleton performing, they were like, hey, can you like, I got to cut this guy in half with a chainsaw, can you do that? I'm behind on my thing, I got to do this other edit. And I'm like, yeah, I got it. Did that thing. So Alan kept me on for like previs and other things. Then he's like, do you rig? And I did rig. So I was doing stunt rigging, so he brought me on the stunt rigging team. Then they lost the guy that was going to be the clown, and I was similar size. And Noah, and I will give him all the credit for this, Alan was freaking out and went, I wouldn't say freaking out, but he was stressed. And he's like, what am I going to do? Such and such just bailed, and I got nobody and this and that. And he's like, who am I going to get? And Noah went and pointed to me, and he's like, how tall are you? And I was so close to the guy that I ended up doing that. Then I was brought back on for rigging. So I added value outside of me fall down good.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And within all of that was just, I guess, one, figuring out within the industry, not necessarily life, like how you can level up and game up. And then when it comes to level up, that's why we help the community and we do what we do, is because a lot of times you'll go to a place and you're going to get sort of looked down upon because your level is here and you should be here, and I don't want you at my space, or I don't want you here. And I'm not calling out any names or anything, but there's a lot of places that do train and teach, but they have a prereq.
Yeah.
And that prereq is like, you need to be top tier to mess with us. And it can be perceived as we're going to put out less qualified stunt people, but I didn't have a me to help me when I was doing this. And I think that that's part of why we do it. And I had a couple of people come to me the other day and say, this is one of the only places that has a sense of community. I come here to create, and I come here to work with people, and I come here to learn, and I do that kind of stuff. So that's sort of what Level Up is in a nutshell. We are a full-scale production company, and we're working on our first feature right now. And if it all goes through, we're going to film in October, and it's going to be cool. And we've got, in this job that I just did, my actor was finishing up, Theo Rossi was finishing up the Penguin, and I was doubling him. and he wasn't there for the first 3 days, and so I had to learn like 6 pages of dialogue, and I got to sit with Michael Rooker and I got a master class, and then we became buddies. And so there's always that aspect with, if people aren't aware of, which is when you're on set and you're doing what you do and whatever else like that, no one told me to take the time to learn how to act, but I did anyway. And then this particular job came up. Now I'm, I could text Michael Rooker, be like, hey bud, how are you? You know what I mean? And that's always something that it came with the fact that, like, then they asked me to do it. I was like, yes, and I was confident enough to do it. I added value outside of that. So really, there's Level Up, and we have a bunch of different classes. And, I would definitely tell people that Saturday is our community training. It's open to everybody. They can come by. And then we're changing the schedule a bit right now because we do need to focus more on our film studio aspect. But it is a place where the stunt community can come and grow and train and learn and do that kind of stuff. Yeah. Which you've been there a couple times.
I've been through a handful of times, yeah.
You went to the boxing. I was out of town. How was that for you?
Well, so I think B was supposed to be running it per whatever schedule existed. And so then I think there were some 30-odd folks that were showed up and no B. And so as fortune would have it, Casey comes in, Casey Zeller, a few minutes late, and she's like, assesses what's going on and in a very Casey fashion goes, all right, let me get 5 lines, and starts running the class. And we still had a great workout. And so that was a lot of fun. Went through a handful of beats. But my experience, Level Up has been exactly as purported, where you guys provide a space that doesn't feel elitist. It is the right price point for a lot of folks at the level that they're at.
What is that price point?
It's $0.
$0.
Yeah, unless you break their stuff, then you just got to replace their stuff. And so I've broken.
Or if you want to rent the space out for your own thing,
then you can rent the space out.
Then we'll talk about that.
Exactly. But you guys have been doing great, and so even to watch you in your infancy, as it were, into where you guys are now, I'm also excited to see where you guys take it from here, because it surely isn't the end.
If it all goes through, man, we're going to do a $3 million picture in October.
There you go.
And I'll tell you, from the life side of things, there's a portion of me that goes, somebody's going to trust me with $3 million. The other side of me goes, absolutely. You see what I did with no dollars? Absolutely, give me the money. I promise that it's going to, you know what I mean? So there's
well, as a guru with $3 million, like, if they're willing to give it to you, then you were supposed to have it.
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
As long as they can be had, they should be.
That's it. Well, we've been talking for about an hour and 22.
Yeah, we can wrap it up, man.
And I would say that we will do this again, but thanks for being on. And what's been your takeaway from being on Bad Beard's Basement Podcast, Beers, Bikes, Brews?
Well, I will say this: it's a very comfortable environment, which is always good. I don't feel like I had to be on, like. I also operate from a place of what you see is what you get. This is who I'm going to be, regardless of however. It's always fun, man, because I was making a point earlier, which was a lot of these guys that I'll sit with at the studio. Tom Watson wrote on the board. He goes, "Life lessons with Babito," right? And I was like, "What's that?" He goes, "Dude, you always drop these gems, and I just want to write them down and do these things." And so I feel like this was a good opportunity to sit and just chat with somebody who is, one, we already found out, through the grapevine with the Sacred Sons and Kevin and the like-mindedness. So this was a good opportunity because some of this stuff was just, fluff, I guess you'd say. It's just us chatting, and some of it, I think, could resonate with people. And I think that was the important thing for me, was to talk about life in the industry. And if there was a point ever, if you bring it all to a head, which is like, it's important to assess and take the time to understand what you deem is important in life. And if that is your career because you got nothing going on, more power to you. But I do know that with me and my mom, and now that my dad is still here, but he's almost 80, like I take the time out and I go, I'm just going to go visit my dad, you know, and I don't care what job comes up and whatever else like that. So, you know, that's for every individual to assess, but that's what I think was great about sitting here in Bad Beard's basement.
Well, I'm excited because I hope equally that these conversations do resonate with people outside of here. But I think that the conversation that we have just organically with each other, regardless of who's listening or watching, is of value. Ultimately to me, because I'm so curious, to you to express yourself. I think everybody has a story, and a format to share it is important. And so this has been always fun for me. And next time we'll have a fresh bottle of something or other.
Oh, you know what? I still got a sip left.
We can really but
you're out.
I can refill.
I was like, we can finish on a cheers.
Absolutely, and this
You know
one
what I mean?
will be brought to you by Rebel 100, friends out in Kentucky. But cheers to you. And then what we are doing is we have our guests sign the table, sir.
Oh, I will absolutely sign the table.
Yeah.
There we go.
Into the next one.
I also love whiskey, so if ever anybody wants to donate to Level Up, it could be whiskey.
Yeah, that was the joke I made. I broke your whiskey glasses, so I brought you for your birthday.
It was good.
Sir. And it smears, so pick wherever, pick the size, doesn't matter.
There it goes.
But don't smear it until it dries.
Doesn't matter where? Like
No,
over here?
anywhere. You get the whole spans.
The whole space?
Yeah.
Here.
Hey.
All right. Yeah, watch this.
Alan will be happy for this one too. Oh yeah, that was great. All right, so this is also the portion. Hop back in your hot seat.
I'm gonna
Casual
hop in my hot seat.
Sitting down because of the broken leg.
All right.
And you can go ahead and speak to this camera.
This camera right
Your
here?
choice, actually. And anything pertinent to the film you have working on, Level Up, you name it. Tell the audience what they should know.
Well, I always am very appreciative of followers to Level Up Film Studio, which is on Instagram, LU Film Studio. Definitely follow this guy over here. I don't know in camera where that is.
Over here.
Yeah, there. You know, Bad Beard, and I do think that you know we have schedules and we have things over at Level Up. So if you're interested in getting in stunts, Saturday's the day to come by. We always do it noon. It's community training. We are going to have, I don't know when this will all broadcast, but we're going to do a Sunday fun day. We're going to do a roller skating rink inside, and we're going to do a dunk tank and some slides and some other stuff and some food trucks out at Level Up. And, you know, I'm Bobby D Stunts on all of it, Facebook and Instagram. There's not much to see there. You know, I don't do social media very well. But you know, sometimes you'll get a life lesson. And then Kevin Walton with the Sacred Sons and Source Radiance and Light Beings. So Kevin Walton, follow him. He's also a prominent actor. And if there's anything to say, it's don't let anybody sway you from pursuing your own dreams, because a 9-to-5 will pay you now, but your dreams will pay you tenfold. So keep following those.
Well, hot dog, that was great. And then just so I can have it in camera while I'm in frame, I'm going to give your intro to, and this will be at the beginning of the episode, where I say,
Editing.
is it in frame? Whatever. And we'll just feature it.
Yeah, feature that shit.